Hi, it's Nick from Some Podcast. Just a quick intro this time for anyone who didn't listen to last week's episode to say that yes, this is the second of two episodes we've recorded during our recent hiatus. This one is recorded about a month ago and features reviews of two then current bits of pop culture, specifically Parasite and Birds of Prey. And this is the end of our hiatus material. We'll be back in hopefully 1 or 2 weeks with an episode actually recorded in the recent past. I think the current plan is to cover Better Call Saul and Doctor Who, because although Doctor Who has been over for a few weeks now, you know, we're a geek podcast here, heaven forfend, we let a season of Doctor Who go past without covering it. So yep, see you soon for that, and I suspect we're going to try not to get too chatty about the coronavirus because you can hear plenty about that elsewhere, but you know, for those who listen to this show, and we know there are at least a few of you, whether you're people we know in real life or some small phalanx of strangers, you know, hope you're alright out there. And I'm sure Alistair would say the same. This is a serious message, so I won't attempt to do his voice. Anyway, here is your month-old episode. Enjoy.
Hello and welcome to Moderate Fantasy Violence, a podcast about pop culture and the world around it. I'm Alistair.
And I'm Nick.
And today we have a February double-headed review special. First we're reviewing Best Picture winning Parasite, and then we'll be following it up with Birds of Prey, the latest film in the expanding DC universe. But before all of that, Nick, what have you been up to recently?
I've been reading the 2000s, I think, mid-2000s Batman crossover No Man's Land, which ran for a year and across 4 Batman comics, basically 4 monthly Batman comics for a year is basically a weekly story. The premise is basically this is at the point where Gotham has been so roundly fucked by a series of unfortunate coincidences. This is after previous annual crossover events where it was ravaged by a plague, a form of Ebola that had people bleeding from their eyes, and then a year later there was an earthquake.
Wow, that is some serious biblical level Gotham destruction.
I know, it's like, at this point, Gotham reaching an EastEnders level of who would live here.
Well, Brookside famously had a flesh-eating virus.
Yeah, clearly borrowed that from Gotham. Or maybe it came first, I don't know. But yeah, a year after that, they had No Man's Land, where the US government basically decided Gotham was beyond help, thanks to a bit of manipulation by people who wanted to make money from this somehow, or who just wanted Gotham to suffer to make Batman suffer. And therefore, we've decided it was no longer part of the United States and told all the residents to leave, and then the city would just be cut off completely. And Batman, being Batman, decided to stay in Gotham and try and fight for the remaining citizens and prove that it was a place worth saving somehow. And it's just Gotham as this sort of dystopian landscape full of tumble-down buildings with people scavenging and fighting each other over soup and batteries. Mm-hmm. And like it's been carved up into territory, each controlled by a different Batman villain. And then there's the police, who are now a gang called the Blue Boys, led by Commissioner Gordon, who are trying to take it back for law and order. And then they split into the good cops and the bad cops. And Batman's allies get sent away and then come back again. Yeah, it's a lot of that sort of thing.
So, I'm not a bigger Batman expert as you are, but I believe I read or someone told me that this is the loose inspiration for The Dark Knight Rises, or one of the main... Because The Dark Knight Rises is the bit when Gotham gets sealed off and kind of becomes a sort of supervillain run post-apocalyptic hellscape. I assume that this comic is the inspiration for that.
Yes, this story is probably, at least on some level, the inspiration for that part of the story. It's sort of a weird mashup of Nightfall with Bane and No Man's Land. Bane is also in No Man's Land, but playing a comparatively minor role as one of the villains, just sort of squabbling.
Nightfall being one of the few Batman comics I have read, I have recognised the similarities between Nightfall and Dark Knight Rises, with obviously the Bane beating up Batman and breaking his back, or at least breaking his confidence.
But yeah, this was adapted loosely in Dark Knight Rises, and I believe slightly more faithfully, I think they may have even called that storyline No Man's Land, in the final season of Gotham, a show I have mocked many times on this podcast and therefore have not seen the final season of. I gather that features both a cheap version of Bane and a cheap version of No Man's Land.
Oh, right.
But the No Man's Land comic is fine. It slacks a bit in the middle, maybe. 52 issues is quite a long time to carry this premise, but it's quite fun. The villains all turn up and take their turn. There's some good work by Greg Rucka, who is quite a well-known comics writer now, but this was, I think, quite early in his career. So yeah, if you ever want to read a really protracted Batman crossover, I got it on a Comixology sale in 4 massive volumes. I don't know if we'll ever see a really like high-budget adaptation of No Man's Land. It's one of these things which isn't really a very Batman-y story.
It's more about Gotham than about Batman.
Yeah, but it came at the end of this period where there was this series of disasters that kept happening to Gotham. And I guess at some point after they've had the meeting about, shall we have a disease? Shall we have this horrific eye-bleeding plague? And then, okay, now should we have an earthquake? And I sort of sat there at some point and gone, Jesus Christ, what next?
Yeah.
And concluded, well, just fuck it. It's a bit, I don't know. One can't go too far into the realism angle whilst discussing superhero comics, but the fact that Gotham ever recovered from this and became a functional city within about 5 or 6 months of storylines after this, but it was basically just a bunch of derelict half-wrecks with their roofs knocked off and supervillains fighting in the wreckage about a year before, is perhaps slightly baffling, but I guess stranger things have happened in reality. Just probably not quite as quickly.
And Brookside managed to recover from the flesh-eating virus, and then within about 3 months of that plotline, it was never really discussed ever again in the small Merseyside suburb.
Was Brookside sealed off from the outside world and turned into a tragic dystopia with people fighting in the ruins for a shred of dignity?
I mean, it's already a tragic dystopia with people fighting for the shreds of their dignity. But
Brookside may have actually been cancelled. I think it might be one of the soaps that has not lasted.
No, it has finished, yeah. For our few American listeners, or people who are fortunate or young enough.
People who are younger than about 30.
Yeah. Brookside was a British TV soap that was known for its completely ridiculous plot lines by even soap standards. And I think, the coup de grace was when there was a plot line involving a flesh-eating virus. Yeah, which I think was done with soap-level budget, which just made it kind of funny.
Also, as a piece of relevant trivia for this episode, I think No Man's Land is one of, if not the earliest appearances of the Cassandra Cain character, who appears in the Birds of Prey film we'll be discussing shortly, although, to be honest, in a completely unrecognisable form.
Yeah, so that's a good way to bring it full circle.
It is, although we don't get to segue straight into the Birds of Prey movie, because instead I have to say, Alistair, what have you been consuming since the last podcast?
Well, this is the time of year when the most worthy films come out. I was about to say, the best films come out, and it's not always the case. Like I say, one of the best films of last year was Avengers Endgame, not an Oscar season film. But yeah, we are just at the end of Oscar season as we record, and there's obviously been a lot of good films this year. And lots of films coming along that haven't been Oscar nominated. They're trying to elbow in edgeways. I'm not going to do a full Oscar rundown because we've got discussion of the Best Picture winner to come. But actually, I wanted to focus for a minute on a film that I thought was absolutely excellent and didn't really get a look in at the Oscars, but did come along in this period of kind of peak worthy filmmaking.
You're of course talking about Sonic the Hedgehog.
I'm of course talking about Sonic the Hedgehog, released yesterday.
Sorry. My mistake. We are of course talking about Cats.
Yeah. Also Cats, which I still haven't seen, but I've got to see at some point. But no, I am of course talking about viral indie hit Uncut Gems, directed by the Safdie brothers, I hope I pronounced that right, and starring Adam Sandler. And it's Adam Sandler as you've really never seen him before. This film is now on Netflix, and I've been urging everyone since I saw it in the cinema to go see it. So if you've not seen it yet, do watch it on Netflix. It's a film set in the late aughts, or noughties, but I refuse to call them the noughties. So it's a film set in the late aughts. Adam Sandler stars as a New York jewelry salesman and sort of perpetual hustler, an extremely stressed man. He lives this completely dysfunctional, chaotic life where he's always borrowing money from someone to pay someone back, and there's always someone trying to break his legs, or he's always trying to hustle to get some sale done, and he's through some entirely unclear, possibly slightly nefarious angles, acquires an extremely valuable black opal, which he tries to sell to several people, including this famous basketball star, who I can't remember the basketball star his name, but he's an actual basketball star paying himself. I don't want to dwell too much on the plot because it's really worth seeing. Everything just spirals continuously out of control. And Adam Sandler is brilliant at this sort of slightly manic, totally out of control man, over in his depth with crazy gambling addiction, who at any point, when he couldn't make a sensible decision, makes the wrong decision to get himself in deeper. It's one of the most stressful 2 hours I've ever spent in the cinema, and I highly recommend it to anyone.
Yep, I too saw this film, and it's great. It's just peak anxiety from beginning to end, just watching Adam Sandler get bashed around by a combination of bad luck and his own terrible decisions. If something doesn't go wrong for him, he'll take it as a sign and do something to make things worse. It's great. The man is a lunatic. But yeah, I have not enjoyed an Adam Sandler film since randomly the film Funny People, which I saw quite a while ago, which is alright, although it does go a bit off at the end. But this is really, really good. He's great in it, and I don't get that caught up in Oscar campaigning, but I do think at least a Best Actor nomination wouldn't have gone astray. He's great in this film.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. The interesting thing about Adam Sandler is that he is very funny at the style of comedy that he does, and he is very good at it. It's not really my taste in comedy, and as we discussed, I kind of prefer sort of Alan Partridge, Peep Show-esque awkward humour is kind of my favourite. Adam Sandler's sort of slapstick, very rude, very in your face, very 90s American humour is not really my thing, but he is extremely good at it. And this has led me to believe that he is actually very, very talented. It's just he's applied his talent to one particular mode of filmmaking and comedy, which has its place, and I know people really like it, and I'm not trying to make any kind of value judgment, it's just not to my taste. But when you see him doing a dramatic role like this, you do really see how talented he is.
Well, yeah, and it's something, I don't know, probably there's threads connecting his style of comedy and this. Like, it's very in your face, it's very shouty. The character he's playing is very obnoxious.
Shouty, manic, yeah, full of energy.
A friend of mine saw this film and said he had to walk out halfway through because he just couldn't handle the amount of Adam Sandler yelling. And yeah, if you don't enjoy stress or Adam Sandler yelling, then you might find this film a difficult watch, I don't know.
Yeah, it's very much like Happy Gilmore if it was Happy Gilmore was slightly more serious and was set in the slightly dangerous world of New York gem selling. But yeah, but like Happy Gilmore is a brilliant film. It's, well, I don't know if I go so far saying a brilliant film. It's a
Happy Gilmore was snubbed at the Oscars.
I think Happy Gilmore is I do find really, really funny. I don't know, it's partly because my dad is a huge fan of the sport of golf, so seeing it royally lampooned in Happy Gilmore is something I really enjoyed. But there are some of his comedy performances I do find very funny. There's a lot of them I don't, but I know that doesn't mean they're not good, and it doesn't mean he's not talented, and it's great to see him doing something that I really did like. And this film is funny. I mean, it's a drama film, and it's got various dark moments to it, but there is some real comedy as well, and it really shows Adam Sandler's comedic side as well as his dramatic side.
And mild side note, if you're someone who likes sort of atmospheric soundtracks to do your work of any kind to, then the soundtrack to Uncut Gems by, I think, Daniel Lopatin, I just looked it up, is very good. It's very sort of dry techno synthy. It puts you on edge a bit, but in a motivational way, I find. You may find it too stressful to work to, I don't know. It's worth a look if you like synth background music.
Yeah, the music is brilliant. It's very good. And the direction as well is really good. The Safdie brothers are definitely a talent to watch. It'd be interesting to see what they do next now that they've obviously uncorked this viral hit. There'll be a lot of attention on them. But yeah, I've added the soundtrack to my list of... When I'm working or writing, I listen to film soundtracks, usually Hans Zimmer ones, because yeah, I find that stimulates without distracting me, and I have added Uncut Gems to the list.
Yeah, if you like your Hans Zimmer soundtrack, it's a good shout.
But yeah, I'd recommend going to Netflix and watching Uncut Gems. If you're not an Adam Sandler fan, don't let that put you off, actually, is the other thing I would say. It is very good.
Okay, and speaking of worthy Oscar movies, albeit one that succeeded a lot more than Uncut Gems did, we're now going to talk about Bong Joon-ho's movie Parasite, which of course won Best Picture, Best International Picture, Best Director and Best Screenplay. So it did well at the Oscars, to put it mildly. This is a film that has succeeded. And yeah, so if you don't already know, I think we're going to attempt to keep the ending spoilers, or sort of the third act twist spoilers, to a minimum on this podcast, but we are going to talk about the basic premise. Yes, feel free to jump to the Birds of Prey section if you want to really go into Parasite knowing nothing. But yeah, the basic premise of this is it's about a poor Korean family, one of whom manages to get a job through a friend working as an English teacher for a rich family's son, and then he notices that, to be honest, this family seem some combination of quite gullible and just not interested enough in their poorer employees to give that much of a damn who they hire, and he manages to finagle jobs for the rest of his family working in the same house using various deceptions and cons on them, and it just builds and builds through this system of this one family increasingly conning this other family, who in turn kind of treat them badly but not too badly. The sort of the push and pull between them and the sort of back and forth of your sympathies is, I guess, one of the main points of the film, along with the sort of gentle build towards a sort of surprising horrific conclusion. Again, we'll be trying to not to spoil it, but I think it's obvious from trailers and posters that eventually events in Parasite are going to take somewhat of a dark turn. So yeah, that is Parasite. Alistair, what did you think of it?
I really like this film. Very much my sort of film in that it deals with class issues, class politics, inequality, lots of themes that I find really interesting. It's really strikingly directed. It's and well shot. So there's lots of things to really like about this film. I was very pleased that it won the Best Picture Oscar, especially this year. I really didn't think it would. Of the 9 nominees this year, I've seen 7 of them. So I've seen them all apart from, I haven't seen Ford versus Ferrari or Marriage Story. Marriage Story is on Netflix, so I will watch that relatively soon. So I can't speak for those 2, but of the other 7, I would say this is the best of those films. So I think, it's definitely better than Joker. I really liked Little Women, but I did think Parasite was probably better. 1917 I also really liked. I thought 1917 might win.
That seemed to be the direction of the conversation in the days leading up to it. It seemed to come down to everyone thinking it was going to be either 1917 or Parasite.
Yeah.
In like the days before the ceremony.
I was worried that they might give lots of prizes to Joker in this sort of sense of we need to finally reward a superhero film. I mean, I think
in the Half Light of Day, Joker was really only ever seriously in the running for the actor award, which it did win for Joaquin Phoenix.
Yeah.
And I think it won soundtrack as well. And to be fair, the soundtrack isn't bad either. Basically, it didn't win Best Picture. Good.
Yeah, which is one of the things, all best adapted screenplay, I think, it was up for as well.
Yeah, I think Jojo Rabbit won that, which we also saw.
And it was also nominated, and I thought was good. I thought if there was going to be a surprise, I kind of thought maybe Little Women might win best, because it is an American classic, and it is a very good adaptation of that. There is the fact that that would involve the Academy giving major awards to women that aren't in the category specifically carved out for women. Then again, they almost never give awards to foreign language films. There's always one token foreign language nominee amongst the best pictures to show, this is in the category for best English language film. It's supposed to be best film, but usually the one foreign language film that makes into the best picture nominees will be the one that'll walk away with best foreign language film and maybe best adapted screenplay or original screenplay if it's lucky, or cinematography prize or something like that, but rarely gets best director or best picture. So I was really pleased when this won, because I do think it is a really good film. It switches genres really ably. Well, it's one of those films that I know it's a bit of a cliche to say this, but it defies genre or transcends genre in that it starts out, it's a sort of dark satire, I would say, or sort of satire, and then gets creepier and eventually becomes straight up sort of horror by the end. Resist saying too much about the end.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, if I was trying to make a like-for-like comparison with Parasite, it reminds me a bit of Inside Number 9 in some ways. This sort of comedy satire, locked in a single house, eventually tipping into horror, is something that quite a lot of episodes of that do. I think it has a bit more righteous anger at its core than Inside Number 9, which sometimes seems a bit like it's just indulgent fun for the writers. But for some reason, it vaguely reminded me of that in its sort of genre trajectory. But yeah, it does it very ably. It builds the cast quite strongly. There's 7, 8 main characters in this, or at least characters who have some sort of storyline or arc, and it's impressive that it establishes them all quite quickly and gives them all a sort of clear journey through it. I can see why, as well as being entertaining, and I know there's a tendency sometimes to think, the subtitled film, it's going to be very stuffy and worthy, but as well as this actually being quite sort of accessible and entertaining, the impressive part of it is how much it fits in without tipping over into being stodgy or stuffy.
I think the Inside Number 9 comparison is very apt. Yeah, it feels like that, especially the way it mixes genres. There's a lot of Inside Number 9s that start out comedy and then become something that happens and suddenly you turn and you're in a different film. Similar to something we discussed recently in this podcast, A Room for Romeo Brass, which starts out more of a comedy and then there's a moment when it sort of switches and becomes more scary.
Yeah, a lot of Inside Number 9s, and again, Romeo Brass have this sort of, it's a vaguely everyday situation. Oh, someone's acting a bit oddly. Oh, shit! Yeah. And they sort of screamed that into the microphone, sorry listeners. And that's kind of the trajectory in Parasite, I guess. Yeah. Really going to dancing around these spoilers like a bastard. But to be honest, it's not really about the jump scares or anything. I mean, this is slightly cribbed from the Overinvested episode on Parasite, which I think I cite them a lot when talking about films, and in my defence, that's because they're really good. There's a lot of what's good about it, I think, is there are a lot of more obvious ways it could have done this story, and it doesn't jump down any of them. It could have made the rich people a lot more awful. It could have had the poorer family who are conning the richer people tip into being unsympathetic by trying to push the con a bit too far. And I don't know, maybe I'm doing spoilers by means of omission here, but it doesn't go in a really obvious way in either of those directions. It manages to sail through this story without aggressively taking a side. And yet it doesn't really come across as bullshit fence-sitting with nothing to say either, which is very, very impressive.
Yeah.
Which is why it keeps winning awards.
It's a nuanced film, which is what I really liked about it. And I think that you're pretty right in that it would have been much easier to make the rich family just sort of unpleasant. They wouldn't even have to be cartoonishly unpleasant, just sort of snobby and unpleasant. But also, they don't make them, they're not too sympathetic. It doesn't go to the point when you're thinking oh, these people are actually all right and it's a shame that they're being conned, because especially the father of the family does clearly look down on poor people. He has this running thing when he talks about the line. He doesn't want his driver, for example, or his staff to cross the line, which is this kind of the idea that you're it's never really defined, but I assume it's this idea that you must always remember you are not on the same level as this guy. He is your boss and he is your betters. And, it is quite nuanced in the fact that they are sort of sympathetic and unsympathetic at the same time. The same with the poorer family who are conning them to a degree, although they con them into getting them jobs, which they need to get by. I mean, it's not like they're not trying to steal their money. I mean, one of the things I thought the film might go in the direction of, and I'm glad it didn't, was that, like, is he going to get to the point when the family that are moving in are going to try and steal the house somehow? Or steal like millions from this rich Korean family? Whereas they don't, it doesn't go in that direction. They just want to get jobs so they can get by, because they're living in a lot of poverty, they can't afford really like particularly nice food, or they live in a sort of rodent infested house, they've got very little prospects. They do play a trick on this rich family, but just to get regular paying jobs. They're not. So there's...
Although they do, I mean, again, gentle spoilers, but they do step over a few people to get to those jobs.
Yeah, but that's the thing. But it's quite subtle with the portrayal of the characters. Like, I know, I'm not going to spoil anything from like the second half of the film, but if you're chronically spoiler adverse, might be worth skipping ahead. But yeah, like for example, the first two members of the families, they get jobs, they just fill vacant jobs. They don't take anyone's job or things like that. Being first a teacher to the older daughter and then the younger son, they're just conning the family into creating new roles for them, a family that can afford it. And a family that doesn't pay huge amounts of attention to their children, bringing people into their lives who genuinely enrich the children's lives and the children seem to really like. The film is quite, the way it makes you go like, at first you're basically like, oh, this is quite clever, and then you're like, am I on side with them? But then also then the rich family have their unpleasant moments, but they're not cartoon villains. I mean...
Well, yeah, but it's a good sort of steady escalation. I mean, I guess it kind of has to be because of the number of characters, but it's a very lean film. It's very, you can hear my excitement of realising what word I was trying to use. It's a very lean film. It very sort of aggressively just moves to, right, here's the next major plot point. Like, you could have probably spent a lot longer showing them settling into their new individual positions and so on. But it's very much just cuts to, right, here's this person has this job now, here's the next escalation to when they next decide to take it up a gear. Realistically, for them to be as familiar with the rich family as they become, there probably has to be at least a few weeks or so between these major events, but we're just not shown them, and at no point does it seem like it's jumping or skipping over major events. It just seems like it's got the right instincts for the story it's trying to tell. I gather they're making an HBO miniseries of this film, an American remake. I don't know if that's going to be good or not. I'm a little sceptical of the need to take something that is very lean and very well judged and make it longer. But on the other hand, Bong Joon-ho is involved. Maybe it turns out it'll be good.
I mean, they could flesh it out they could make the families bigger, I suppose.
Well, they can make it bigger. They could build more into the relationships. They could show some of this settling in time. It's on HBO. It could end up being good, but I do like the way that this film, without feeling like it's rushing or chunks of time are being skipped over, just takes you very ably through the story.
Yeah, you don't really get much of a sense of how much time is passing. It just very much just move from one event to the next event. And in a way it's quite clever. Each new member of the poorer family who gets, infiltrates their way into the service of the richer family is the one who recommends the next member, or somehow then brings the next one in. And I guess what you're left to assume is that, like, okay, so enough time passed for the daughter giving the younger son art lessons, or art therapy stroke art lessons, has passed for her to win the confidence of the rich mother in order to recommend someone for the position of the driver when they get the driver fired. I mean, you just got to assume that, like, some time has passed and these people have, like, you don't need to show them winning the confidence of the family.
Well, no, because they're quite intelligent, able people, the poor family. They come in, I mean, the daughter especially is shown as being very, very sharp and very intelligent. They can just come in and pull off this con and then make these people like them. It never seems unrealistic because they're portrayed in that way.
Yeah, and there's lots of things it says about sort of inequality in both South Korean society and in sort of global society of global wealthier countries. So the way that the poor family live in this substandard accommodation, they can't really afford food or things like that, and they've got bug infestations. There's a bit when their home gets flooded out and they basically have nowhere to go, and the rich family don't seem to be aware of the sort of the suffering that's going on around them. They live in a sort of very nice neighbourhood in a sort of high-walled private compound in a very, very nice sort of modernist style house. But yeah, there's very much a sense that they've insulated themselves from the rest of the world, so they don't have to be selfish. They're just kind of not really aware of the lives of all the people who are driving them around and bringing them food. So they don't have to be Dickens characters filled with cruelty to poor people, because they managed to create a system which has pretty much insulated them from the consequences of their actions.
The wife of the rich family especially she's not portrayed unsympathetically for the most part, but she's just very, very oblivious.
Yeah.
Like, she's very much in her little bubble. She's almost never seen outside either the house or the car.
Yeah.
And she doesn't have to look outside it. I mean, the film as a whole exists in somewhat, for a lot of the time, in the confined space of this house they've built, I assume, especially for the film. There's a couple of, like, big shots that happen quite a lot. There's these stairs which come up through this doorway in the middle of a wall, which makes for some very nice shots that they use several times. And there's a huge window at the back as well. Again, maybe I think it's one of the things that evoked Inside Number 9 for me. It's very much about this, like, space they're all trapped in together.
Yeah. And they must have just custom built the set, I assume, for it. Like, I thought there's probably a house that's used for the exterior. There's probably the interior is sort of feels like a custom built set. I mean, I can't really sing this film's praises enough. I think it's definitely worth watching. It is really funny as well in places as well, especially in the earlier bits. There was some really good humour, and it's interesting because the humour does translate quite well from one culture to another. One thing I always find interesting is that comedy is quite culturally specific. There are some kinds of comedy that really transcend cultural boundaries, like slapstick is one. It's one of the reasons why, like, Mr. Bean and, like, Charlie Chaplin and things like that is, like, funny the world over. Partly because they're silent, you don't need language, but there's something in the slapstick mannerisms that are funny. There's a great Hong Kong film called Kung Fu Hustle, which is the Far Eastern film that is a slapstick comedy that is very, very funny. But this is interesting that this does have a humour that translates really well across cultural boundaries and across languages. It's very much a humour of, oh, I see what they're doing. The kind of knowing humour of, as soon as you kind of, something drops, oh, I see how this character is manoeuvring or this other character think a certain thing, and things like that. And you kind of get this knowing, oh, I see what's going on. Sort of comedic irony.
Yeah, it's sort of the class interactions between the upper and lower class families do, I think, translate across quite nicely. Plus, I guess it helps that we're all increasingly universally using quite similar apps and stuff to do quite similar things in our daily lives. So, like, there's a sequence towards the start but the poor family are desperately trying to find a new way to get free Wi-Fi so they can use WhatsApp. And, I too use WhatsApp.
Yeah,
so therefore I related to that scene.
Yeah, it could be a scene from a slightly more modern update of him and her, or Shameless or something like that. You could see that happening. And I guess the class relationships are quite reminiscent of lots of British films that are based around class relationships. Again, there's a upstairs downstairs thing very much in this film, in that, like, there's a family that's the sort of the serving class and a family that's the owning class. Especially in Britain, I think one of the reasons why this film has struck a real chord here, I guess, is we are a very class-based society. Same as South Korea, we've got very strict social conventions about roles and things like that, and sort of social customs in Britain, which South Korea, I'm led to believe, has. Also, we've got similar concerns, like, as we become a more unequal society, as rich people and poor people lead significantly isolated lives, which this film really picks up on, this general sense of murmurings of class discontent, and where will murmurings of class discontent lead. But I don't want to say too much in the spoiler.
But yeah, it's obvious that is, the film does take, it's more horrific and slightly more serious tone at the end, which does, leave you with these sort of things to think about. And it's the two sides of it really. On the one hand, we ought to stress that this is a very good, entertaining, comedy, heisty, conny movie. Con movie, sort of caper movie, which does then at the end take this sort of dark horror, oh shit, this is actually serious business twist.
Yeah, although I saw it with you, Nick, obviously, and also saw it with my partner, who is really not a fan of horror or things that are particularly violent, and I think she did really enjoy it. Yeah, so if you are concerned about the violence in it, it's not, I think, off-puttingly violent. It's not like horror. It does have some quite unpleasant scenes to it, but I think that if you're concerned about, I wouldn't be concerned about the level of violence, or horror if you're not into horror, as my partner isn't, but she still enjoyed the film.
Yeah, in short, this is a film for everyone. Alright, next, our second February film to chat about. We are, of course, going to cover Birds of Prey, or to give it its full title, Birds of Prey, or The Fantabulous Emancipation of One Harley Quinn, in which Harley Quinn, played by Margot Robbie, escapes from the Suicide Squad movie and the entire tone of that movie, and Jared Leto's Joker, after they break up, only to find that without being the Joker's girlfriend, people are suddenly a lot more keen to kill her for her continued insulting and or maiming of them. So, partly in the name of survival and partly because she gets mixed up with a dickish crime boss played by Ewan McGregor, she ends up teaming up with a bunch of other female superheroes, including Black Canary, played by Journey Smollett-Bell, and Mary Elizabeth Winstead Huntress, to help form the Birds of Prey team. Although that doesn't really happen till the end, and until then it's mostly just them all rioting around getting into scrapes. It's basically a manic, fun action comedy film in a vaguely Deadpool-esque vein, which Well, we're going to review it in a minute, so we can get onto that now. Alistair, what did you think of this film?
Yeah, so I don't think I've enjoyed a superhero film in the same vein as this since Guardians of the Galaxy. I mean, it's kind of really nailed the comedy and action combination, which we talk about a lot on this podcast. And obviously we think the world, or at least we have come to the conclusion that the best way to make a superhero film is to have some combination of humour and action. And this is the time I think DC got the brew right. It's very much, I think, reminiscent of the Guardians of the Galaxy sort of format of quite a lot of comedy and quite a lot of kind of intense action scenes.
Yeah, I think it's the sort of manic misfit team-up thing which I think provides a nice sort of backdrop for this. I mean, the Harley Quinn character, played by Margot Robbie, I think was generally seen as the best part of Suicide Squad, and they sort of pulled her out of that, and let her go even further with that performance and get into this sort of fast-talking Deadpool role where she's this sort of vaguely self-aware, constant, manic, chattering, violent presence, and everyone else just sort of reacts around her. And they've put her in this sort of crime caper thing where everyone's looking for a MacGuffin, in this case, this specific diamond.
Yeah.
And yeah, it just works really well. It's a very simple film in a lot of ways, even though the plot is, I'm sure this is kind of part of the joke, put across in the most confusing way possible in the first half of it, with quite a lot of cutting around between characters and jumping back and forwards in time. Yeah, I'm sure it's very much part of the joke they're doing, but I'm just sort of sitting there going, wow, you've really picked the most convoluted way possible to portray this quite simple plot. I'm sure it's probably one long joke at the expense of Pulp Fiction or something, but yeah.
Yeah, well, a lot of films like that. But also kind of the way they do it by jumping through time is it allows them to introduce each character in turn, because what they kind of do is they kind of tell each of the characters has a sort of separate way into the story, and then obviously they team up sort of towards the end or in like the sort of the third act. So what they kind of do is you get the kind of the first act told over about 3 or 4 times from different perspectives. So yeah, you get kind of Harley Quinn's intro into the plot all the way up to this one point when Harley Quinn meets another character, and then you kind of get that character's intro another way. I mean, I'd probably drop a few spoilers to stop me just saying something needlessly convoluted. There's a bit, probably about a third of the way into the film, when Harley Quinn breaks into a police station where the sort of detective character has just received a tip-off from the Black Canary character. And then what you get is you see, obviously, the events up to the point when Harley Quinn breaks into the police station, and then you see the detective story bringing her to that point, and then you see the Black Canary's character bringing her to the point when she does the tip-off. So by doing that, it allows them to introduce each character, and you kind of get a sense of who they are, because, you know, other than Harley Quinn, these aren't characters we're familiar with.
Although I should say that, you know, this is nominally an ensemble film, but really it's a Harley Quinn film, and everyone else is a B-level supporting character. The main people I've seen aggressively get on this film, or at least express dissatisfaction with it, are disappointed Birds of Prey fans. And I'm not going to lie to you, Birds of Prey fans, I can see why you might be disappointed. Harley Quinn has taken over your film, but I'm not a Birds of Prey fan, and I just thought this film was fun.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't really aware that Harley Quinn wasn't in Birds of Prey until you told me. I assumed she was, that's why they made the film.
Yeah, no, it's as far, I don't know, the apocryphal story I've heard, which may or may not be true or may or may not be more complicated, is that basically everyone agreed Margot Robbie was the best bit of Suicide Squad. They said, Margot, do you want to make a Harley Quinn movie? She said, no, I'd like to make this ensemble film based on the Birds of Prey comic with lots of female characters in it. They said, okay, Margot, we'll do that, but because she's the moneymaker, they have still bent very heavily towards Harley Quinn.
Yeah, I mean, Margot Robbie is the highest profile star in this, and Harley Quinn's the best character and the character people are most familiar with, so it makes sense. I mean, from my point of view, I'm sure Birds of Prey fans probably feel slightly aggrieved by this. It looks like, though, maybe they'll do a sequel probably without Harley Quinn. It's more just straight up Birds of Prey. Who knows?
I don't know what'll happen there. But yeah, as far as this story goes, I quite like the way that, as well as finally getting a sort of comedy action balance that actually works, this film does feel like something quite distinct. This sort of glittery neon funfair aesthetic they've got going on doesn't feel like other superhero films, which it's something we've said before in the eternal, never-ending duality between Marvel and DC. It's like good and evil.
Yeah.
Night and dark. Shit and not shit. But Marvel, much as I do enjoy seeing those films, there is a certain sense of the house style to a lot of them. And whereas DC seem to eventually, after taking some time to reach that point, concluded that the way they're going to attempt to distinguish themselves is by giving their directors a bit more freedom to go, right, we're going to make this film a bit more war-y, this one a bit more Indiana Jonesy, this one is, it's a sort of, basically, what if Deadpool fucked a Tarantino film? Yeah, this sort of manic comedy crime film.
Yeah, and the sort of the visual style is very much kind of like fun Batman in that it's kind of like got the grim, dark sort of Gotham thing going on, but they've kind of thrown in like, again, lots of like neon stuff and bright coloured things. Like there's a bit open in the early bits of the film when like a chemical plant explodes in a sort of shower of glittery sort of fireworks and glowing stuff and things like that. It's kind of like it's the Batman aesthetic of a bit more fun and razzmatazz injected into it. Kind of closer, actually. I think heard people compare this. It's much closer maybe to the Joel Schumacher Batman aesthetic, a bit more carnival-esque, a bit more glittery, but probably slightly grittier than Joel Schumacher. There's no bat nipples in this.
Yeah, I think it is. In terms of the palette and the style they've done Gotham in, it is quite Joel Schumacher-y, or possibly even go back to the Batman 66 live-action TV show. But yeah, it's kind of Joel Schumacher-y, except because they're not seriously trying to flog 10 million action figures with this R15-related film, they've allowed them to play it for laughs and be a bit sillier with it. Plus, obviously, Deadpool has somewhat laid the ground for this in some way by making it clear that if you get the audience in, you can produce stupid, sweary comedy superhero films, and people might still turn out for them.
Yeah, I think as well as Guardians of the Galaxy, which we discussed, and the Schumacher Batman films, a good reference to this is Deadpool. Like, they've given Harley Quinn a voiceover which runs throughout the film, and it's supposed to be a very meta voiceover in that it's clearly the character speaking directly to the audience. It's not kind of, say, a Irishman voiceover when it's supposed to be clearly like the character speaking to someone else or being sort of reflective. It's very much the character in the moment giving their opinions sort of to the audience in a sort of the way that Deadpool will like do it even more abruptly, the way he would just like look directly at the camera and speak to this. But they've added this meta level by allowing sort of Harley Quinn to pass judgment or like to make comments on things as they're happening directly to the audience, which is kind of funny and kind of meta. It also does help the quite complicated jumping around and the sort of complicated structure to a simple story. It makes it kind of make sense when basically Harley Quinn can basically say, this is what's happening now and this is the stuff you have to pay attention to.
Yeah, although Harley's personality does dominate the film, especially because even when she's not on screen, she is often doing that voiceover Alistair just mentioned. I should stress that even though I made that remark earlier about the other Birds of Prey being pushed back to a B level, it's not necessarily a bad B level. They do all get personalities. I particularly liked actually how they played Huntress, who in some comics, or I think her appearances on the Arrow show as well, can come across a bit as a sort of female Batman-esque version of the Punisher, where basically her thing is she runs around on rooftops and kills people with a crossbow, and Batman doesn't like her because of said killing. But in this film, they've kind of played her as this weird sort of socially awkward serial killer. Like, she turns up, she's incredibly good at fighting. Like, she's got a backstory to explain why she's incredibly good at fighting, but she's got this sort of Batman-esque origin, but she's had to be away from most of the world, becoming incredibly good at fighting. She also has this incredibly weird, standoffish, socially awkward thing going on, which is very sort of, I don't know, weirdly endearing and relatable for a character whose main character trait, other than being endearingly awkward, is constant murder. So yeah, it's a very fun characterisation, and it's not a joke that needs to be used to death, but it's very good in this film, and it makes you want to see more of that character in what, as Alistair says, the hopeful one day maybe Birds of Prey sequel with possibly a bit more Birds of Prey in it.
Yeah, I like the character Huntress. Thought she was really well done. A really great sort of like foil to Harley Quinn in that she's sort of quiet and aggressive and well, not foil, I suppose, like counterpoint, whereas like she's another competent killer and the others who are sort of more novices at it, but she's sort of quiet and contained. I like the running thing that everyone calls her the crossbow killer, but she really wants to be known as Huntress, and there's a great scene when she's about to say, no, my name is... And then you want to say Huntress, but then it cuts to her in like her pajamas, practicing into her bathroom mirror, saying like, "My name is Huntress." And it's just like, there's just something about it, that moment of like, if you were a superhero, you would practice in the mirror saying your name so that you could deliver it right when the time comes. And then I think it cuts back to reality, and she just gets talked over so no one hears.
Yeah,
so moments like that are very funny.
Yeah, it's very relatable and endearing. Yeah, it's a very nice film. It's not, if there is a difference between this and Deadpool, although Deadpool does normally try and get back to some sort of vaguely positive moral, or not positive moral, but, you know, the character attempts to have some sort of relatable human journey, how he needs to love people or it's bad to murder. The Birds of Prey characters actually do seem like quite nice people who would be fun to hang out with in a weird way, even though Harley Quinn especially compulsively does crimes and occasionally breaks people's legs.
Yeah.
It's a very... It's in a weird way quite an enjoyable film to sort of lean back and relax in, whereas Deadpool is quite manic, shoot, guns, blood, joke, guns, swear, fuck, blood, guns, fuck, swearing, shit, guns. Whereas Harley Quinn and the relatable, unbearable ignorance of Birds of Prey is not quite like that. It has a slight distinct feel in a sort of enjoyably rowdy way. I think people have called it the producers and people who make it, refer to it as a girl gang movie, and I think that's as good a sum up as anything.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. Yeah, and there's a great sort of thread of like friendship running between the characters. There's a great thread of sort of female friendship. There's also very much a story of it's them against the men of the world who kind of want to do them down or kill them, just usually because they're women who've gotten their way. There's a lot of angry men. I think almost all the henchmen they end up fighting at various points are men, and the main villain played by Ewan McGregor. I thought Ewan McGregor is very funny and quite scary in this, actually, when he is this sort of manic gangster who enjoys cutting people's faces off. I think he's good, and so you get this sense of it's like they're really digging into this thing of this group of women banding together against the sort of patriarchal society as epitomised by this sort of Ewan McGregor mob boss, and it plays on themes that I like and I enjoy, and it really works. It makes you, like you say, sort of sympathetic with the characters. You really buy their they need to bond together because women need to look after each other in a patriarchal world, and there's like a nice bit when Huntress dispatches a henchman quite violently, and Harley Quinn just says like, "You're so cool." And I guess they're trying to get this element of like, women should support each other and encourage, rather than being at each other's throats, which patriarchal society encourages women to, to do down each other and have rivalries. That actually women should support each other in these ways. And and by Harley Quinn complimenting Huntress on her murder abilities. That's kind of getting into that kind of sorority element of, sorority is in like sisterhood, not like the American University thing. This sort of theme that the film has running through it, which I thought worked well.
Yes, but in a particularly twee, preachy way, because obviously what she's complimenting Huntress for is, as you say, crossbow murder. Yeah. And Harley Quinn herself is quite prone to casually going, "You've annoyed me with your behaviour in this corridor. I'm going to kneecap you." And she does this throughout the film continuously, and sometimes it's barely even commented on.
Yeah, well, it's taken a thing from, I think, a lot of feminist discourse. Yeah, the idea that women need to support each other, but given it a sort of particular DC or Birds of Prey-esque spin-off, which is women really should support each other, which means is encouraging them to do murders.
Well, yeah,
to do murders of the nasty men.
Maybe it's just because there aren't quite as many cantankerous female characters who are allowed to just be casually violent. But yeah, it's an enjoyable field.
Yeah, I like the way there was so much in this film, I think, translating discourse from feminist stuff that I've been reading or seeing on the internet into the film. Like, it's quite a diverse cast for Birds of Prey. I haven't read the comics, I'm not really sure. But they've got obviously two women of colour and...
Renee Montoya is being translated more or less as Prince. I think Black Canary is normally white, but in this film is not.
Yeah, and they've got a diverse range of different women of sort of skin tones. The characters have different backgrounds. They don't all have the same like idealized sort of superhero body types. There's like, I don't even know sure where I'm going with that, but you understand there's diversity in those different ways in the plot, and it's about women coming together and supporting each other through difficult times in a patriarchal society. But it's also translated into this kind of Harley Quinn-esque sort of like magical murder world.
Yeah, it's not a preachy film. I've seen some people in comments, and I'm reluctant to over-address it because half of them are probably Russian bots. But yeah, going sort of, I don't want to see Harley Quinn because I don't want to see a film that encourages me to hate men, or I don't want to be preached at about how men are responsible for all that's bad in the world. So it's mostly just a film about how women being allowed to have a nice time, mate. Admittedly, it's a nice time in the sense of murder, but that's just because it's a Harley Quinn, a Joker-adjacent Batman-y film.
Yeah.
They don't, as far as I'm aware, spend that much time in this film sitting around talking about how all men are evil and need to be shot with crossbows. They usually have specific reasons for wanting to shoot people with crossbows.
Yeah, exactly. And it's usually because the men are coming to hurt them or kill them or do something quite unpleasant to them, which is fine. I think a lot of this is down to the director, Kathy Yan, who has done an amazing job. Like I say, I really like the visuals. The aesthetic is really good. The kind of Schumacher-esque kind of colour and vibrancy to it. The costuming I thought was great as well, especially how Harley Quinn seems to have almost a different costume in each scene is really, really good. And there's loads of little things, like I saw on Twitter, this has been pointed out a lot, but I wanted to mention it here. Like, there's a scene when Harley Quinn gives Black Canary a hairband in a fight sequence so she can put her hair up. And like little things like that you just wouldn't have got in a film, I think, if it wasn't directed by a woman. But I think one of the best bits for this is there's a scene which is one of the kind of classic villain scenes when the Ewan McGregor character is building up. He's a big nasty villain by picking on this poor woman in his nightclub who's just annoyed him, and he's just bullying her basically. And he's bullying her in a very nasty way in that he's like kind of cutting her clothes off and just generally humiliating her. It's quite an unpleasant scene played to build up the unpleasantness of the villain. But when he's cutting the woman's clothes off, they didn't do, I think a male director would have got a gratuitous shot of the woman standing there in her underwear, but it's very well cut and shot around that to get the full horror of how he's really humiliating this woman because he's just a nasty piece of work, but without there being any vicarious sort of leering at this woman's body. It's the way it's shot is very knowing of that. No one should be taking any kind of pleasure from the scene. It should just be scary, and it's done very well. And I thought that really is the sort of thing when a lesser director or like a male director it would come across in a different way, when there would have been some sort of sexual pleasure probably the audience would derive from it, and they really avoided that, which I thought was very good.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of talk about the female gaze in this movie. There's a lot of it in the costuming. Harley Quinn obviously has gone from wearing a tight t-shirt and tiny hot pants in Suicide Squad, hot pants that were famously photoshopped slightly higher up her thighs between the trailer and the final film. Yeah, as I saw those comparison shots, it was grim. And yeah, in this film, she's wearing still quite moderately short hot pants with like dungarees and a massive furry jacket. You know, it's still not an unflattering outfit by any means, but it's just a bit less, hey, look at me boys, and there is a tangible difference there.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know, it makes the film feel less cheap. They're not trying to lure you in with just like, oh, here's some superhero DNA to spend your money on. The reason to see this film is that it's funny, it's well directed, it's got good action scenes in it, it's got a good plot, it's got engaging characters. It's not because of tight costuming. I
mean, you know, I get a worrying feeling we've talked about this longer than we did Parasite, possibly just because we're a bit less nervy about spoilers. And, you know, it's not going to change your life. And if you put a gun to my head and said, Nick, which one is better, which one should I see? The answer is probably Parasite. But at the same time, if you do just want to see a fun action film with the punchy smashing and the jokes and the sort of manic energy, this is probably not a decision you'll regret. It's a very decent action film. It's a very strong start to the year in superhero movie terms.
Yeah, no, it has set the bar high for superhero films this year. And it's unusual that, the first one at the gate is a DC film and it's set a high bar. So I'm interested to see what the rest of this year's superhero films will be like. That's all we have time for in this episode of Moderate Fantasy Violence. If you've enjoyed this podcast, then please leave us a review on iTunes or in your podcatcher of choice, as it helps other people find out about the show. You can also visit our website, moderatefantasyviolence.com, where you can listen to other episodes of this podcast, bonus audio clips, and short written pieces by Nick and myself.
Or indeed, you can follow us on social media as at MFV Podcast on Twitter, or you can go to Facebook and search for our name. And there you can receive such things as occasionally our amazing pop culture opinions and or updates on our currently, unfortunately, sporadic release schedule. I've been Nick Bryan. You can find me on the internet at NickMB on Twitter or at nickbryan.com for more details of my writing, including some new comics coming pretty soon. I may even be doing a Kickstarter, and I'm sure I'll be mentioning that again.
I've been Alistair Ball. You can follow me on Twitter at AlistairJRBall, and you can find more of my writing at redtrainblog.com.
And yes, as I've mentioned a second ago, slightly sporadic release schedule, still my fault, sorry. My desk is in pieces, my computer is in pieces, my audio editing setup is a disaster. I mean, to be fair, by the time this comes out, I would have reassembled my desk, edited the previous episode, and then edited this one. So it may no longer be quite as big a problem. But yes, we apologise for what will have ended up being quite a big gap between 104 and 105. We will hopefully, by the time you actually end up listening to this, be back relatively soon with our next episode, which will be about an unspecified TV show or film. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Goodbye.
Bye.
This is the voice from the future. The rest of this year's superhero films, you say?